A reading from the Gospel of John. The scribes and the Pharisees brought a woman who had been caught in adultery. And making her stand before all of them, they said to him, "Teacher, this woman was caught in the very act of committing adultery. Now in the law, Moses commanded us to stone such women. Now what do you say?" They said this to test him, so that they may have some charge to bring against him. Jesus bent down and wrote with his finger on the ground. When they kept on questioning him, he straightened up and said to them, "Let anyone among you who is without sin be the first to throw a stone at her." And once again he bent down and wrote on the ground. When they heard it, they went away, one by one, beginning with the elders. And Jesus was left alone with the woman standing before him. Jesus straightened up and said to her, "Woman, where are they? Has no one condemned you?" She said, "No one, sir." And Jesus said, "Neither do I condemn you. Go your way, and from now on do not sin again." I remember the eyes as though it were yesterday. They were pretty, blue, expectant yet afraid. "This is Diane," one of my new fourth grade classmates said, pointing in her direction. "Don't let her touch you. She's the Cootie girl." I did not know then, and I'm not entirely sure today, what a cootie is, but I could tell from the context that it wasn't a good thing. Cooties, and by extension, Diane herself, should be avoided at all costs. I was the new kid at Winona School. My family had just moved to Bay City, Michigan from the farm country of southern Minnesota. And on that first day of school, I was desperate for a friendly face among these city kids everywhere around me. There was something different about Diane. My family was hardly affluent, not by any stretch of the imagination, nor were the kids at Winona School. But the dress she wore was tattered. Her shoes appeared to have been repaired crudely and by hand. Someone whispered that she and her mother lived alone. And although she had a pleasant smile, Diane looked slightly disheveled and unkempt, waif-like. Occasionally, the Cootie girl would play along. After listening to taunts on that black top that passed for a playground in this strange new world, Diane would chase her tormentors, who would shriek in horror and run away. Anyone she tagged, boy or girl, had cooties, which, although it appeared to have had no long-term effect, was not considered a good thing by the fourth grade cohort at Winona School. Like a pack of wolves taunting a moose, children can devise ingenious ways to belittle anyone they choose to ostracize. I recall one day standing in a queue across the hallway from a janitor's closet. One of my classmates had apparently been musing on the word custodian painted on the door. "Hey, look," he shouted, moving his hands across the letters and articulating the syllables slowly. "Cuss to Diane." Everyone chortled at the brilliance of the put-down, but I caught the wounded look in Diane's eyes. Yet another insult, yet another scar to carry home that night. "And where do you stand?" the eyes asked. Would the new kid become just another tormentor, or maybe, hoping against hope, a friend? I think I recognized even then that it was a defining moment. Are you with us, my new classmates were asking, or are you going to be a geek, a loser, an outcast like the Cootie girl? In the words of the Pharisees in the gospel reading, what do you say? Jesus fashioned an entire career out of his association with outcasts. He spent his time with harlots and tax collectors. Fishermen were hardly the elite of Palestinian culture in the first century. And when the Jewish equivalent of a lynch mob was collecting rocks to execute the adulterous woman, Jesus crouched down, scratched a few letters in the sand, and with a few well-chosen words, dispersed the mob. The Gospels don't record what he wrote there in the dust, but my guess would be that it had something to do with who we are, all of us, in the divine economy. Perhaps Jesus listed the names of her accusers, and perhaps he added the names of every man who had ever slept with the accused woman, and who knows? There may have been a name or two that appeared in both columns. The bearded men packing stones were no better than the woman caught in someone's bedroom. We are all sad and pitiable, the dusty letters read. We have terrible secrets and overwhelming fears, and one of the signs of our wretchedness is that we organize into packs to deceive ourselves into thinking that we are not somehow as lost or as desperate or as hopeless as we know we really are. There is safety in numbers. And one of the timeless ways we congratulate ourselves is to draw lines and boundaries, marking off who is good and bad, righteous and unrighteous, saved and damned, cool and not cool. Careful, of course, to locate ourselves on the right side of those lines. I'd like to think that Jesus scratched out a few choice words for the Pharisees and the Palestinians, saying, "You sorry old fools are really trying my patience," or something like that. But then he thinks better of it, rubs out the curses. He stands up and surveys the scene. His eyes meet each of the accusers and then take in the woman. Back to the Pharisees and back again to the woman. Then Jesus steps back several paces, crouches down, and with his index finger traces a large circle. A circle big enough to take in the whole crowd, the Pharisees and the woman, and maybe even a few bystanders, the accusers and the accused. A circle, the quintessential symbol of femininity, a metaphor for eternity. A circle large enough to encompass everyone entangled in the web of our shared humanity, our wretchedness, our loneliness, and suffering. I wish I could tell you that I did the right thing back there on the macadam playground at Winona School. We all like to be the heroes of our own stories. But I'm not very good at this hero business. I'm reasonably certain that I could never have been numbered among Diane's worst tormentors. But sometimes, very often in fact, silence is complicity. I don't pretend that history would have been different if I had been kind to Diane, the Cootie girl, back in Michigan nearly 5 decades ago. But I would have been different. And perhaps she as well, if only for a moment. I was naked, and you clothed me. I was sad and lonely, and I was wearing a ratty dress because my mother couldn't afford anything better. But you stood up to the crowd and became my friend. If only it were so. I lost track of Diane long ago, although I remember her from time to time in my prayers. She never made the transition from elementary to junior high school with the rest of us. Perhaps her mother found a new boyfriend or a new job, or perhaps they decided to try a new city, to take their chances in a different school and a different community, a place where the Cootie girl could simply be Diane, and she could start over. Jesus comes along and disrupts our childish games, our taunts and our sarcasm. He reminds us that he, the crucified one, was the ultimate outcast, facing the ridicule of everyone, deserted even by those who had claimed to be his friends. That he was suspended naked between earth and heaven for the benefit not only of the righteous or even the self-righteous, but for the outcast, the person of color, for the hungry child. Jesus visits our playground with a thin piece of chalk and draws a large circle. He straightens up, surveys his fellow sufferers, and gently suggests that if we have the courage somehow to see Jesus in the Cootie girl's wounded blue eyes, then we will have grasped something very important about the gospel. I was naked, and you gave me a shirt. I was thirsty, dangling there from that cruel wooden tower. You came with water. I was hungry, and you brought me a slice of pie at the lunch counter, even though you would be fired for serving me. I was unconscious, lashed to a barbed wire fence on that cold Wyoming night. You wrapped me in a blanket, hoisted me over your shoulder, and carried me home. I was the Cootie girl. You were my friend.